The hospital monitor beeps rapidly. Footsteps echo in an empty stairwell. Chiamaka is pressed against the cold hospital stairwell wall, her breathing uneven, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. Her head wrap is slightly loose, strands of her natural hair escaping. Yong Joon-Seok stands inches from her, one arm braced beside her head, his expensive cologne mixing with the antiseptic smell of the hospital. His tailored suit is perfect. His control, absolute. They are one breath away from something forbidden. Suddenly, a nurse bursts through the stairwell door, panicked. "Sir, your patient in ICU 7 just flatlined." Chiamaka's eyes widen in absolute horror. She shoves Joon-Seok away with both trembling hands. "My father is dying, and this is what you're doing to me?" The nurse looks between them, confused, scandalized. Joon-Seok doesn't chase her. He simply adjusts his cufflinks with mechanical precision and says, cold and devastatingly calm, "You walked into this arrangement knowing I control whether he lives or dies." Chiamaka collapses to her knees on the concrete steps, sobbing, her head wrap falling completely. "Then why does my body betray me every time you come near?" He looks down at her, not with pity, with something darker, hunger mixed with recognition. "Because you need me, and you hate yourself for it," he says and walks away with pride. Hot tears roll down Chiamaka's cheeks as she mutters to herself. 2 weeks earlier, I believed pride could save my father. I believed dignity was worth more than survival. I was wrong. Wrong about everything. Wrong about this man. She holds herself, collapsing to the side. "Hey, family, can we talk for just 10 seconds? That scene you just watched, Chiamaka breaking down, Joon-Seok admitting he controls whether her father lives or dies. That's just the beginning. And I need you here for every painful, beautiful, complicated minute of what comes next. Subscribe to this channel because we're building a community that isn't afraid of complex stories. Stories where love isn't clean, where right and wrong blur, where characters make us uncomfortable because they reflect our own contradictions. Smash that like button if you're ready to feel everything. And comment, "I'm here," so I know you're riding this journey with me. Because Chiamaka is about to walk into hell, and we're going with her. Chapter 1. Chiamaka Nwankwo sat in the sterile waiting room of Seoul International Hospital, her medical school textbooks spread across her lap. At 24, she was in her final year at Yonsei University, balancing a brutal study schedule with part-time work at a Korean Nigerian cultural center. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, marking time in that peculiar way hospitals have, where seconds feel like hours and hope drains slowly like an IV bag. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Soo-hyun, the hospital administrator, approached with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Nwankwo, I'm afraid there's been a complication with your father's treatment approval." Chiamaka stood abruptly, her textbooks tumbling to the floor. "Complication? His surgery was scheduled for tomorrow. The donor heart is ready. The hospital board has decided to prioritize another patient. Your father's case will be reconsidered in 6 weeks." 6 weeks? Chiamaka's voice cracked. "He has stage 4 heart failure. He won't survive 6 days without intervention." Mrs. Soo-hyun's expression remained professionally neutral, cold as the hospital's marble floors. "Perhaps you should have secured better insurance, Miss Nwankwo. Seoul International caters to a certain clientele." Chiamaka's hands began to shake. She thought of her father, Ejike Nwankwo, lying in the ICU at this very moment. The man who had sacrificed everything to send her to Korea for medical school, who had worked 3 jobs in Lagos, who believed education could break the chains of generational poverty. He had sold their family home, borrowed from relatives, pawned his father's watch, all so his daughter could become Dr. Nwankwo someday. "I'll pay," Chiamaka said, her voice breaking. "Whatever it costs. I'll work. I'll borrow." The surgery costs 450 million won. That's approximately 350,000 US dollars. Can you produce that by tomorrow? The silence that followed was suffocating. The number was impossible. Chiamaka made barely enough to cover her tiny apartment and send a little money back home each month. $350,000 might as well have been 350 million. "I thought not." "Good day, Miss Nwankwo." As Mrs. Soo-hyun walked away, Chiamaka noticed something. The administrator glanced nervously at a closed office door at the end of the corridor, a door with no nameplate, just a symbol, a minimalist phoenix in silver, its wings spread in eternal ascent. Who makes these decisions? Chiamaka whispered to herself. Who decides who lives and who dies? Later that evening, Chiamaka sat in the hospital cafeteria with her best friend Hyo-rin, a 25-year-old surgical resident who had been helping her navigate Korea's complex medical system since her father's collapse 3 months ago. Hyo-rin stirred her coffee nervously, not meeting Chiamaka's eyes. "Chiamaka, I shouldn't tell you this, but Seoul International isn't just a hospital." "What do you mean?" "It's owned by a private equity firm. Decisions aren't made by doctors anymore. They're made by him." "Him who?" Hyo-rin hesitated, then leaned forward and whispered like she was speaking a curse. "Yong Joon-Seok. He controls 12 hospitals across Seoul. Rumors say if he wants a patient denied treatment, there's nowhere else in Korea you can go. He has arrangements with other facilities, partnerships, understandings. That's illegal. That's power." Hyo-rin interrupted. "The kind money can't buy, only inherit and multiply over generations. The Yong family built half of modern Seoul. They own politicians, judges, entire districts. Medical ethics boards don't touch them." Chiamaka's jaw set with dangerous determination. "Then I need to speak with this Yong Joon-Seok." Hyo-rin grabbed her hand across the table. "Chiamaka, no. You don't understand. He's not like other wealthy men. He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't compromise. There are stories, people who challenged him, businesses that competed with him. They just vanish. Not violently, but completely. Legally destroyed. Then he'll have to destroy me. Because I'm not giving up on my father." Hyo-rin looked at her friend. This brilliant, stubborn, Nigerian woman who had faced racism, sexism, and xenophobia to excel in one of Korea's most demanding medical programs, and saw something that frightened her. She saw someone willing to walk into fire. "If you do this," Hyo-rin said quietly, "don't go alone. And don't go without understanding that men like Yong Joon-Seok don't lose. They just change the game until they win." Chapter 2. Young Industries headquarters rose like a black mirror in the heart of Gangnam, its 70 floors reflecting clouds and ambition in equal measure. Chiamaka stood in the lobby, wearing her best interview outfit, a second-hand blazer she'd found at a charity shop in Itaewon, her hair in an elegant braided bun, trying to project confidence she absolutely didn't feel. The building smelled like money, not the crass scent of new wealth, but the subtle, woody aroma of old power, leather, imported wood, and the kind of marble that had been quarried from mountains in Italy. The receptionist, Ms. Yoonji, looked at Chiamaka like she was an insect that had crawled in from the street. Mr. Yong doesn't take unscheduled meetings, especially not from... She paused, her eyes traveling deliberately over Chiamaka's brown skin, her second-hand blazer, the small crucifix her mother had given her, hanging at her throat. Students. Chiamaka placed a business card on the pristine white desk. She had printed them herself at a convenience store. Cheap paper, slightly crooked text. Then tell Mr. Yong that Chiamaka Nwankwo is here to discuss his illegal medical monopoly and the systematic denial of treatment to foreign nationals at Seoul International Hospital. I'm sure he'd prefer to have that conversation privately, rather than with the Korean Medical Ethics Board, the international press, and the Nigerian embassy. Ms. Yoonji's expression flickered. Was that fear? Or respect? She picked up the phone with manicured fingers and spoke rapid, Korean, her voice dropping to a whisper. 5 minutes later, Chiamaka was being escorted into an elevator that required a fingerprint scan to access the executive floors. The assistant who accompanied her said nothing, but Chiamaka could feel judgment radiating from her like heat from asphalt. The elevator opened directly into an office that looked designed to intimidate. Black marble floors reflected the ceiling like dark water. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Seoul that felt like looking down at the world from Olympus. Minimalist Korean art adorned the walls, ink paintings that probably cost more than a house. And at the center, a desk made of a single piece of dark wood, its surface empty except for a slim laptop and a jade paperweight in the shape of a coiled dragon. Yong Joon-Seok stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, looking out at the city like a king surveying his kingdom. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored suit with careless perfection. His black hair was styled with the kind of effortless precision that took both expensive stylists and good genetics. When he turned, Chiamaka's breath caught, not because he was handsome, though he devastatingly was. Sharp jaw, full lips, eyes the color of dark coffee, but because those eyes were completely, utterly empty of warmth. Looking into them was like looking into deep water at night. You knew something was down there, but you couldn't see it, couldn't measure its depth. You have 3 minutes before security removes you. His English was perfect, accent-free, the product of expensive international schools. Make your blackmail attempt compelling. Chiamaka forced herself to meet his gaze. It's not blackmail, it's a negotiation. Negotiation requires leverage, Miss Nwankwo. You have none. My father, Ejike Nwankwo, was denied a life-saving surgery at Seoul International Hospital, a surgery that was approved, funded, and scheduled until someone, you, decided he wasn't worth saving. Joon-Seok moved to his desk and sat, steepling his fingers in a gesture that was probably unconscious, probably learned from his own father. Seoul International denies dozens of procedures daily based on medical prioritization algorithms. Your father's case was reviewed by our board and found to be non-priority. Non-priority? Chiamaka's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. He's a 58-year-old man with a donor heart match. The surgery has an 80% success rate. He's also a foreign national with limited insurance, no family wealth, no connections to Korean industry, and a 67% 5-year survival rate post-transplant when you factor in his diabetes and hypertension. Joon-Seok's voice remained flat, clinical. From a resource allocation standpoint, the decision is logical. We have limited surgical teams, limited ICU beds, limited donor organs. We prioritize cases with the highest probability of long-term success and the highest social value. Chiamaka's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something at his perfect, emotionless face. You're talking about my father like he's a spreadsheet entry. In my world, Miss Nwankwo, everything is a spreadsheet entry. Your father, you. This conversation, life is mathematics. Some people simply don't solve the equation favorably. He pressed a button on his desk. Ms. Yoonji will escort you out. Panic flooded Chiamaka's chest. This couldn't be it. She couldn't leave this office without something, without hope, without a way forward. She had promised her father she would find a way. She had promised herself she wouldn't beg. But promises meant nothing when you were watching someone die. Wait! The word burst from her like a confession. Please, I'll do anything. I'll pay you back over time. I'll work for free at your hospitals for years. I'll sign away my salary. I don't need your labor, Miss Nwankwo. I have thousands of employees, far more qualified than a foreign medical student who hasn't even completed her residency. Then what do you need? The question hung in the air between them. Something shifted in Joon-Seok's expression, subtle as a shadow moving across water. He stood, walking around his desk with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known fear, never known hunger, never known desperation. He stopped close enough that Chiamaka could smell his cologne, cedar, and something darker, something that reminded her of the incense in her grandmother's church back in Lagos. An interesting question. His voice dropped lower, more thoughtful. You're a medical student at Yonsei University. Top 15% of your class despite working 20 hours a week. You volunteer at a free clinic in Itaewon on weekends. You send money back to Lagos monthly, even though you barely have enough for yourself. You've been in Korea for 3 years and maintained your dignity despite considerable cultural friction. Chiamaka's skin went cold. You investigated me. I investigate everyone who enters this building making threats. Standard protocol. He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was considering whether to solve. You're proud, stubborn. You believe suffering silently is strength. You've built your entire identity around moral superiority, the dutiful daughter, the selfless medical student, the woman who never bows. Is there a point to this psychological analysis? Yes. He returned to his desk, opened a drawer, and removed a document. I'm offering you a Yoon-jis. He slid the paper across the desk. Chiamaka approached cautiously, like it might burn her. The document was a contract, dense with legal language, but the key terms were highlighted in yellow. Employment agreement, duration, 365 days. Employee will reside at employer's primary residence. Employee will appear at employer's side when requested for business and social functions. Employee will maintain absolute discretion regarding all aspects of employment. In exchange, employer will provide full medical care for Ejike Nwankwo, including immediate heart transplant surgery, post-operative care, and all necessary treatments for 1 year. Chiamaka's hands trembled as she read. This is You want me to live with you? I want you available. My schedule is unpredictable. I attend events that require a companion, someone intelligent enough to hold a conversation, presentable enough not to embarrass me, and completely under my control. This sounds like you're buying a... Careful how you finish that sentence. Joon-Seok interrupted, his voice sharp as a scalpel. This is a standard employment contract. You'll have your own quarters, your own space. There are no sexual obligations. Yet, Chiamaka whispered. His eyes flashed with something. Anger? Amusement? Your father has 72 hours before his condition becomes inoperable. After that, no amount of money will save him. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with mechanical precision. Sign the contract, and I'll have him in surgery tomorrow morning with the best cardiac team in Asia. Refuse, and you can watch him die knowing your pride was more important than his life. That's not fair. Fairness is a fairy tale we tell children, Miss Nwankwo. This is the real world. In the real world, power makes the rules. He walked to the door, opened it, then paused. You have until midnight to decide. After that, the offer expires. Why? Chiamaka demanded, her voice breaking. Why me? You could hire anyone. You could... Because you hate me, Joon-Seok said simply. And I find that infinitely more interesting than admiration. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Chiamaka stood alone in that massive office, the contract in her trembling hands, and understood with perfect clarity that she was about to sell her soul. And the worst part? She was going to do it willingly. Chapter 3. Midnight arrived faster than Chiamaka thought possible. She sat in her tiny apartment in Sinchon, one room barely larger than a closet, with a hot plate for cooking, and a bathroom so small she had to close the door to turn around. The walls were covered with her father's photographs. Him at her high school graduation in Lagos, him at the airport the day she left for Korea, him smiling despite the tiredness in his eyes, despite the weight of 3 jobs and a mortgage and the constant worry about money. The contract sat on her makeshift desk, unsigned. Her phone buzzed. Hyo-rin. Did you meet him? What happened? Chiamaka stared at the message, unable to form a response. How could she explain? How could she tell anyone that she was considering moving into a stranger's house, becoming his property in everything but name, selling 365 days of her life for her father's surgery? Another message from Hyo-rin. Whatever he offered, say no. Please, these men don't give gifts. They take hostages. Chiamaka looked at the time. 11:47 p.m. She thought about her father, about the promise she had made to her mother before she died of malaria 5 years ago. Take care of your father. He gave everything for you. She thought about dignity, about pride, about the version of herself she had always wanted to be. Strong, independent, beholden to no one. Then she thought about her father's hospital room, the monitors, the tubes, the way his breathing had become labored, desperate, the way he tried to smile when she visited, tried to pretend he wasn't terrified. I loved you even when I hated you, she whispered to a future self, practicing words she didn't yet understand. At 11:59 p.m., Chiamaka signed the contract. Her phone rang immediately, as if he had been watching, waiting. Joon-Seok's voice was emotionless. A car will collect you tomorrow. Bring only personal items. Everything else will be provided. When is my father's surgery? Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I've assembled the team. Dr. Min-soo will perform the procedure. He's the best cardiac surgeon in Korea. Can I see him before? Briefly. You'll have 15 minutes. The line went dead. Chiamaka sat in the darkness of her apartment, the signed contract before her, and felt something inside her break cleanly, like a bone snapping. She had made her Yoon-jis. Now she would live with the consequences. The next morning arrived wrapped in fog. Chiamaka packed a single suitcase, clothes, her mother's Bible, photographs, the jade bracelet her grandmother had given her for protection. Everything that mattered could fit in one bag. Everything except her dignity, which she was leaving behind. The car that arrived was exactly what she expected. Black, expensive, windows tinted so dark they looked like portals to another dimension. The driver said nothing, just opened the door with efficiency. The drive took 40 minutes, weaving through Seoul's morning traffic, leaving behind the cramped neighborhoods of Sinchon for the exclusive hills of Hanam-dong, where Korea's elite built their palaces behind high walls and security systems. The gate to Joon-Seok's estate opened silently, revealing a driveway lined with sculpted pines. The house itself was a masterpiece of modern Korean architecture. Glass, stone, and dark wood arranged in clean lines that seemed to float above a manicured lawn. It was beautiful the way a knife was beautiful. Perfect and cold. Ms. Yoonji met her at the entrance, her expression suggesting Chiamaka was a stain on expensive carpet. Your quarters are on the 3rd floor, East Wing. You'll find everything you need has been provided. Mr. Yong expects you to be ready for dinner at 8 p.m. Appropriate attire has been placed in your closet. I need to see my father first. Mr. Yong is aware. The car will take you to the hospital now. You have 15 minutes, as promised. Seoul International Hospital looked different when you arrived in an expensive car. Staff literally bowed as Chiamaka walked through corridors that had rejected her just yesterday. The same Mrs. Soo-hyun, who had dismissed her with contempt, now smiled with professional warmth. Miss Nwankwo, your father is being prepped for surgery. You may see him briefly. Her father's room was in the VIP wing now, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden. Ejiki Nwankwo lay in the bed, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that breathed and monitored and measured. But his eyes were alert, and when he saw his daughter, he tried to smile. Chiamaka, my precious girl, they tell me there's been a miracle. They tell me the surgery is happening today. Chiamaka took his hand, feeling how thin it had become, how the bones pressed against papery skin. Yes, Papa. Everything is arranged. How? The money? Don't worry about money, Papa. Just focus on getting better. Ejike's eyes searched his daughter's face. He had raised her. He knew her. He could read the spaces between her words. What did you do, Chiamaka? I found a way. What did it cost? Chiamaka couldn't answer. She just held his hand and pressed her forehead against his fingers and tried not to cry. My daughter, Ejike whispered. I did not raise you to sacrifice yourself for an old man. You sacrificed everything for me, Papa. This is just me repaying the debt. There is no debt between father and child, only love. Nurse entered. I'm sorry, miss, but we need to prepare the patient now. Chiamaka kissed her father's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of him. Cocoa butter and old books and the soap he had used for 30 years. I'll be here when you wake up, Papa. I promise. As the nurse wheeled him toward the surgical wing, Ajike looked back at his daughter and saw something in her eyes that terrified him more than his own failing heart. He saw a woman who had just traded her future for his. Chapter 4. Joon-Seok's estate had 15 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a home theater, an indoor pool, a gym that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, and a library with first editions. Chiamaka's quarters, as Ms. Yoonji had called them, occupied the entire east wing 3rd floor. It wasn't a room. It was an apartment. Bedroom with a king-sized bed and silk sheets. Sitting room with a view of Seoul's skyline. Bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. Walk-in closet already filled with clothes in her exact size. Designer labels she'd only seen in magazines. On the bed lay a note in elegant handwriting. Dinner at 8 p.m. Wear the black dress. Don't be late. HYJ. Chiamaka wanted to tear the note into pieces. She wanted to throw the expensive clothes out the window. She wanted to run. Instead, she showered in water that came from 6 different jets, dried herself with towels softer than anything she'd ever touched, and stared at the black dress hanging in the closet. It was beautiful, of course, simple and elegant. It fit perfectly, hugging her curves in ways that felt both flattering and invasive, like Joon-Seok had studied her body and commissioned something specifically to display her. At 7:55 p.m., Chiamaka descended the curved staircase to the 1st floor. The house was eerily quiet, her heels clicking on the floors. The dining room could have seated 30 people. Instead, there were 2 place settings at one end of a table made from a single piece of walnut. Candles flickered. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, something Korean, melancholic and beautiful. Joon-Seok stood by the window, still in his suit from earlier, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned when she entered, and his eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin feel too warm. "Punctual?" he said. "I appreciate that. I was told not to be late." "You were told many things. You'll find I'm very particular about obedience." Chiamaka's jaw clenched. "Is that what this is? An obedience test?" "No. This is dinner. The obedience test comes later." He gestured to the chair. "Sit." She wanted to refuse, to throw the dress in his face and storm out. But her father was in surgery right now, Dr. Minsu's hands literally holding his heart, and she had signed a contract promising compliance. So she sat. A woman Chiamaka hadn't even noticed. Another staff member, rendered invisible by efficiency, brought the first course. Some kind of delicate soup with vegetables, carved into flowers. They ate in silence for several minutes. Finally, Joon-Seok spoke. "Your father's surgery went well. Dr. Minsu says the transplant was successful. He'll be in ICU for 72 hours, then recovery for 2 weeks. Relief flooded through Chiamaka so powerfully, she nearly dropped her spoon. He's alive? He's going to be okay? Barring complications, yes. Though I should mention, the contract stipulates I provide care for 365 days. If you violate any terms, that care terminates immediately. The relief crystallized into ice. You're saying, if I disobey you, you'll let my father die. I'm saying actions have consequences. You wanted to save him. I'm giving you that opportunity, but my generosity has conditions. Generosity, Chiamaka repeated bitterly. Is that what you call buying a human being? Joon-Seok set down his wineglass with a soft click. I didn't buy you, Miss Nwangwo. You sold yourself. There's a difference. The words hit like mostly because they were true. Why are you doing this? Chiamaka demanded, her voice breaking. You could have anyone. You have more money than God. Why do you need me? Joon-Seok was quiet for a long moment, studying her across the candles and expensive china. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, more honest than she'd yet heard. Because everyone in my life wants something from me. Money, status, access, they smile and bow and pretend to be whatever they think I want them to be. He paused. But you look at me like I'm exactly what I am. A monster who holds your father's life hostage. You don't pretend, you don't perform, and I find that refreshing. So, I'm what? Your exotic pet? Your proof that even pride has a price? You're my companion for the next 365 days. What you become beyond that? He smiled, and it was the most unsling thing Chiamaka had ever seen. Empty of humor, full of something darker. We'll discover together. Chiamaka stood abruptly, her chair scraping against marble. I need to check on my father. Sit down. You can't. I can do anything I want, Miss Nwankwo. That's what absolute power means. But I'm giving you a Yoon Jice. Sit down, finish dinner with civility, and tomorrow you can spend all day at the hospital with your father. Or leave now, and you won't see him again until I decide you've learned your place. The room seemed to contract, the walls pressing in. Chiamaka stood frozen between flight and surrender, between dignity and love, between the woman she was and the woman she was being forced to become. Slowly, hating herself with every movement, she sat back down. Joon-Seok's smile widened fractionally. Good girl. Those two words ignited something inside her. Rage mixed with something she didn't want to name, something that felt dangerously close to the sensation that would eventually lead them to that stairwell, that moment, that forbidden almost kiss. They finished dinner in poisonous silence. Chapter 5. The next 2 weeks fell into a routine that felt like slow suffocation. Mornings, Chiamaka would visit her father at the hospital. Ejike was recovering well, his new heart beating strong and steady. But he watched his daughter with worried eyes, asking questions she couldn't answer. Where are you staying? Who is paying for this? What have you done, my child? She lied smoothly, told him she'd received an emergency scholarship, a grant, help from the Korean Nigerian community. He didn't believe her, but he was too weak to press, too grateful to be alive to interrogate the miracle too closely. Afternoons, she attempted to study in Joon-Seok's library, but found herself distracted by the strangeness of her new life. Staff who addressed her as Miss Nwankwo with perfect deference. A Korean tutor who appeared without explanation to help her improve her language skills. A personal trainer, a nutritionist, a stylist, all arranging themselves around her like she was precious rather than purchased. Evenings belonged to Joon-Seok. Sometimes, he required her presence at dinners with business associates. Severe men in expensive suits who discussed mergers and acquisitions while their eyes lingered on Chiamaka with curiosity and barely disguised racism. She learned to smile blankly, to nod at appropriate moments, to be decorative and silent. Other times, he simply wanted her there while he worked, sitting in his home office, reading while he reviewed documents and made calls that casually destroyed companies, ended careers, reshuffled millions of dollars like playing cards. He never touched her, never made inappropriate advances, but his eyes followed her constantly, studying her like she was an experiment whose results he was curious to observe. One night, 2 weeks into her captivity, Chiamaka couldn't sleep. She wandered the house in darkness, feeling like a ghost haunting her own life. She found herself in the library, reaching for books at random, and pulled down a volume of Korean poetry. "Can't sleep?" she spun. Joon-Seok stood in the doorway, wearing silk pajama bottoms and nothing else. In the moonlight filtering through the windows, Chiamaka could see he was more than just handsome. He was beautiful in a way that felt almost inhuman. Perfect proportions, smooth skin, muscles that spoke of disciplined training rather than vanity. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said. "You live here. You can't intrude." He moved into the room, pulling a book from a different shelf. "Though at 3 a.m., I have to wonder what's keeping you awake." Guilt. The honesty surprised them both. Joon-Seok tilted his head. "Explain." "My father thinks I'm a scholarship student living in university housing. He thinks I'm still the daughter he raised, principled, independent, strong." Chiamaka's voice broke. "But I'm not anymore. I'm whatever you've made me." "I haven't made you anything. You're exactly who you always were. A woman willing to do whatever it takes to protect the people she loves. That's not strength. That's weakness, dressed up as sacrifice." Joon-Seok moved closer, close enough that Chiamaka could smell his skin, clean and warm and dangerous. "You think strength is never bowing? Never compromising? Never trading pieces of yourself to survive?" "Yes." "Then you don't understand power at all." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "Real power isn't refusing to bend. It's choosing when to bend and never breaking. You signed my contract, moved into my house, wear the dresses I provide, but you haven't broken. Your eyes still burn with hatred every time you look at me. Your spine never curves. You obey the letter of our agreement while violating its spirit at every opportunity." He reached out and touched her chin, the first time he touched her skin directly. His fingers were warm. "That," he whispered, "is power." Chiamaka jerked her head back. "Don't touch me." "Or what? You'll leave? We both know you won't." But he dropped his hand. "Your father is being discharged tomorrow. He'll need post-operative care. I've arranged a private nurse and a recovery suite near the hospital, somewhere he can stay comfortably while remaining close to Dr. Min-soo." "You're helping him?" "I'm fulfilling my contract. There's a difference." "Is there?" Chiamaka challenged. "Because right now, it almost sounds like you care." Joon-Seok's expression hardened instantly, all vulnerability vanishing like it had never existed. "I care about maintaining my investments. Your father is alive because keeping him alive ensures your compliance. Don't romanticize logistics." He turned and walked away, leaving Chiamaka alone in the library with a racing heart and the disturbing realization that she'd been disappointed when he stepped back, when he stopped touching her. The realization terrified her more than anything that had happened since signing that contract. Chapter 6. "Chiamaka, you look beautiful, but you look different." Her father's observation came 3 days after his discharge, as they sat together in the recovery suite Joon-Seok had provided, a space more luxurious than any hotel Chiamaka had ever seen, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul and medical equipment that whispered rather than beeped. "Different how, Papa?" Ejik studied his daughter with eyes that had watched her grow from a crying infant in Lagos to a determined woman in Seoul. "Tired, worried, like you're carrying a weight you Won't share. I'm fine, Papa. Just stressed with school and don't lie to your father. His voice was gentle but firm. I may be weak, but I'm not blind. These past weeks, I've watched you come here, wearing expensive clothes. I've seen the car that brings you. Not a taxi, but a private driver. This suite, this care, the way the hospital staff treat you like royalty. He paused. Who is he? Chiamaka's blood went cold. What? The man who owns you. Because that's what this is, isn't it? Some wealthy Korean man who saw a desperate, beautiful girl and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. Papa, it's not. Does he hurt you? No. The answer came quickly, honestly. He's never. He doesn't touch me like that. Then how does he touch you? The question was impossible to answer. How could she explain that Joon-Seok touched her without touching? With looks that lasted too long, with words that peeled back her defenses, with a presence that consumed every room he entered. He doesn't, Chiamaka finally said. This is just a job, Papa. I work for him, that's all. Ejik reached for his daughter's hand, his grip weak but insistent. When your mother was dying, she made me promise something, she said. Don't let Chiamaka sacrifice herself for us. We already gave everything so she could be free. His eyes filled with tears. I'm breaking that promise, aren't I? By living, I'm stealing your freedom. No, Papa, don't say that. Then tell me the truth. What did you trade for my life? Chiamaka looked at her father, this good man who had worked himself to exhaustion, who had believed education and hard work could overcome any obstacle, who had never asked the world for anything he hadn't earned, and she couldn't tell him the truth. That his daughter had become property, that she lived in a cage made of silk and marble, that every night she wore dresses chosen by the man who owned her father's heartbeat. 365 days, she whispered instead. I work for him for 365 days. Then it's over. You're healthy, I finish medical school, and we go home to Lagos. We start over. And what happens to you in those 365 days? I survive, Papa, just like you taught me. Echike pulled his daughter close, and she curled against his chest like she used to when she was small, when the world's problems could be solved with her father's embrace. I'm so sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. You did protect me, Papa. You gave me everything. Now it's my turn. They sat like that until the nurse came to check vitals, until the moment broke, until Chiamaka had to return to the estate and the man who waited there like a spider in the center of an invisible web. That night, Joon-Seok had guests, other wealthy elites celebrating some business victory Chiamaka didn't understand and didn't care about. She was required to appear, to smile, to stand beside him while men in Tom Ford suits discussed politics and women in designer hanbok asked her intrusive questions about where she was really from. Your Korean is quite good, one woman said, her smile sharp as glass. How long have you been studying our language? 3 years, Chiamaka replied evenly. And you live here? In Mr. Yong's home? Another woman, younger, her jealousy poorly disguised. That's quite unconventional. Miss Nwankwo is my personal assistant, Joon-Seok said smoothly, his hands settling on the small of Chiamaka's back, a gesture of ownership disguised as politeness. She requires proximity for the nature of her work. How modern, the first woman said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. After an hour of barely concealed, racism and gossip disguised as conversation, Chiamaka excused herself and escaped to the garden. The night air was cool, autumn beginning to assert itself. She stood among sculpted trees and thought about running, just walking away, finding her father, leaving Korea, abandoning everything. They're insufferable, aren't they? Chiamaka turned. A man stood a few feet away, younger than the others inside, maybe 30, with a kind face and eyes that actually seemed to see her as human. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "The vulture's inside. I'm Jin-woo. I work with Joon-Seok's tech division." He extended his hand. "You're Chiamaka, right? The medical student?" She shook his hand, surprised. "How did you know that?" "Joon-Seok mentioned it during a meeting. Said you were brilliant, studying at Yonsei despite working full-time. Sounded almost proud." Chiamaka's laugh was bitter. "I doubt that. Pride requires caring, and Yong Joon-Seok doesn't care about anything." Jin-woo's expression shifted. "Be careful making assumptions about him. I've worked for Joon-Seok for 5 years, and I've learned he's not what people think. The coldness, the cruelty, it's armor, not identity." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've seen how he looks at you when you're not watching, and it's not how he looks at anyone else." Before Chiamaka could respond, a voice cut through the garden like a blade. "Jin-woo, I need you inside." Joon-Seok stood at the garden entrance, his posture relaxed but his eyes burning with something dangerous. Jin-woo nodded quickly and left. Joon-Seok approached Chiamaka with measured steps. "Making friends?" His voice was deceptively mild. "Having a conversation? Is that forbidden in our contract?" "Conversations are fine. Flirtation is not." Chiamaka's anger flared. He wasn't flirting. He was being kind. A concept you might want to research. Kindness from men like Jin-woo always has an agenda. And cruelty from men like you? What's that agenda? They stood inches apart now, tension coiling between them like a living thing. Joon-Seok's jaw clenched. "You want to know my agenda? You want honesty? I want you to stop treating me like property." "You are property. You signed a contract. That you coerced me into signing. That you chose to sign." Joon-Seok shot back. "You could have let your father die with your dignity intact. You could have walked away. But you didn't. You traded yourself for his life. And now you stand here in a dress I bought you, in a house I own, insulting me because the cage I've built is too comfortable. You're a monster." "Yes." He stepped closer, and Chiamaka's back hit the garden wall. "I'm a monster. I'm cruel. I'm cold. I manipulate and control and destroy anything that threatens what's mine." His hand came up, not touching her, but caging her against the stone. "But I kept my word. Your father is alive. Your tuition is paid. You have safety, security, and luxury most people only dream of. I'd rather have freedom. Freedom is an illusion people tell themselves to feel powerful." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You were never free, Chiamaka. Before me, you were a slave to debt, to your father's expectations, to a system designed to crush foreign students. At least now your chains are visible. And that's supposed to make it better? No, it's supposed to make it honest." His eyes dropped to her lips. The moment stretched, dangerous and electric. Chiamaka's breathing quickened. She hated him. She feared him. And somewhere in the darkest corner of her mind, she felt something else entirely, something that made her skin warm and her pulse race. Don't, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was warning him or herself. Joon-Seok's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Don't what? I'm not doing anything. I'm just standing here. You're too close. Then push me away. Chiamaka's hands came up, pressed against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat under her palms. Steady, powerful, unlike her own racing pulse. She should push. She should shove him away and run. Instead, her fingers curled into his shirt. You're confusing, she breathed. You're terrible and generous and cruel and I don't know what you want from me. I want you to stop pretending you don't feel this. His hand finally touched her, fingers tracing her jaw. I want you to admit that you hate me and want me in equal measure. I want honesty, Chiamaka, the same honesty you demand from me. I can't. You can. You just won't. A voice called from inside, a guest looking for their host. The spell broke. Joon-Seok stepped back, his expression returning to that familiar cold mask. We should return. People will talk otherwise. He walked away, leaving Chiamaka trembling against the wall, her hands still tingling from touching him, her mind screaming warnings her body refused to hear. That night, alone in her quarters, Chiamaka wrote in the journal she'd started keeping. Day 47. I touched him willingly tonight. I didn't push him away. Papa would be ashamed. I'm ashamed. But when he stood that close, when his eyes looked at me like I was something precious instead of purchased, I forgot to hate him. Just for a moment. I'm losing myself. And the worst part is, I'm not sure I want to be found. Chapter 7. The next morning brought an unexpected gift. Or perhaps another manipulation. Chiamaka couldn't tell the difference anymore. Ms. Yoon-ji appeared at breakfast with an envelope. Mr. Yong has arranged for you to return to Yonsei University. Your courses will resume next week. A car will take you to and from campus daily. Chiamaka stared at the class schedule inside the envelope. He's letting me go back to school? Mr. Yong believes education is important. He's also made arrangements with your professors regarding your absences. Everything has been managed. Of course it had. Because Joon-Seok didn't just control her life, he rewrote it, reshaped it, made it impossible to distinguish between prison and privilege. When Chiamaka confronted him that evening, she found him in his office, surrounded by monitors displaying stock markets from around the world. Why? She demanded without preamble. Context would help. Why are you sending me back to school? What's the angle? What do you get from this? Joon-Seok swiveled in his chair, studying her with those unreadable eyes. You were miserable. You need purpose beyond serving as my ornament at dinner parties. This serves both our interests. How does my education serve you? You'll be less resentful, less likely to do something foolish. And, he paused, something flickering in his expression. You worked too hard to let your degree die because of me. The admission stunned her into silence. Don't romanticize it, Joon-Seok added quickly. This is practical. A depressed companion is useless. A fulfilled one is easier to manage. But Chiamaka had seen that flicker, that moment where his armor cracked. You're not as heartless as you pretend. Don't mistake strategy for sentiment, Miss Nwankwo. Then why do you watch me like that? Like what? Like you're trying to figure out if I'm real. The air in the office shifted, became dense with unspoken things. Joon-Seok stood, approaching her with that predatory grace. You want to know the truth? The real reason I chose you? Yes. Because you're the first person in 10 years who looked at me and saw exactly what I am. Not potential, not status, not a ladder to climb or a resource to exploit. He stopped close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. You saw a monster, and you looked me in the eye anyway. That's not a reason. That's an obsession. Yes. His admission was simple, devastating. It is. Chiamaka's breath caught. This is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. I know. Then why? Because wrong is all I know how to do. His hand came up, and this time she didn't flinch away when he touched her face. I was raised to be this. My father was cruel. My mother was weak. I learned early that mercy gets you destroyed, that love is a weapon people use against you. So I became hard, impenetrable, successful, and lonely, Chiamaka whispered. His hand dropped like she'd burned him. I'm not lonely. I'm powerful. You can be both. Get out. Joon-Seok. I said get out. His voice was ice. Before I forget that you're here by Yoonjis and remind you what you actually are. Chiamaka left, but the encounter haunted her, because she'd seen something in his eyes before he shut down, something desperate and human and utterly lost. Returning to Yonsei was disorienting. Her classmates asked where she'd been, why she'd missed so many weeks. She invented stories about family emergencies and medical research opportunities. Hyo-rin saw through every lie. You're living with him, aren't you? Her friend whispered during a break between lectures. That's why you disappeared. That's why you suddenly have expensive clothes and a private driver. Hyo-rin. I'm not judging. I'm worried. These men, Chiamaka, they don't let people go. Once you're in their world, 365 days, Chiamaka said firmly. Then it's over. You really believe that? Chiamaka didn't answer because she was no longer sure what she believed. Classes provided a strange normalcy. Lectures on cardiac physiology, labs dissecting frog hearts, study groups arguing about pharmacology. For a few hours each day, she could pretend she was still just a medical student, with dreams of becoming Dr. Nwankwo, returning to Nigeria to open a clinic, helping people who couldn't afford Seoul's luxury hospitals. But every evening, the car returned her to the estate, to Joon-Seok. They fell into a new pattern. He no longer required her presence every night, giving her space to study. But when he did summon her, for dinners, for events, for silent evenings in his office, the tension between them grew more unbearable. One night, 3 months into her contract, everything changed. Joon-Seok took her to a charity gala, one of those glittering Seoul affairs where Korea's elite pretended to care about poverty while wearing jewelry worth more than the donations they pledged. Chiamaka wore a red dress that clung to her curves like sin, and she watched wealthy women whisper behind their hands as Joon-Seok kept her close, his hand never leaving her waist. During dinner, a man approached. Older, powerful, with eyes that assessed Chiamaka like merchandise. Joon-Seok, introduce me to your beautiful companion. Chairman Soo-hyun, this is Miss Nwankwo. Chiamaka, Chairman Soo-hyun controls most of Seoul's real estate development. Chairman Soo-hyun extended his hand, holding Chiamaka's longer than necessary. Charming. Tell me, Miss Nwankwo, how did you come to work for our young tycoon here? I needed something. He provided it. Standard employment arrangement. And And does this arrangement include private consultations? I'm always looking for talented assistants. The implication was clear. Disgusting. Chiamaka opened her mouth to respond, but Joon-Seok moved faster. Ms. Nwankwo is not available for consultation, Chairman Soo-hyun. Her contract is exclusive. Everything has a price, Joon-Seok. Surely we can negotiate. Joon-Seok's voice dropped to something lethal. Touch her, speak to her, even look at her again, and I'll destroy every development project you have pending with the city. I'll buy your debt. I'll ruin you so completely your grandchildren will still be paying for your mistake. Chairman Soo-hyun's face went white. He bowed stiffly and left. Chiamaka stared at Joon-Seok. What was that? That was me protecting my investment. That was you being jealous. Don't be ridiculous. You just threatened to destroy a man for looking at me wrong. That's not business. That's possession. Joon-Seok grabbed her arm, not roughly but firmly, and pulled her toward a private balcony away from the crowd. The Seoul skyline glittered before them like a field of fallen stars. You're right, he said. And the admission seemed to cost him something. I am jealous. Irrationally, violently jealous of any man who speaks to you, touches you, makes you smile. It's illogical. It's beneath me, and I can't stop it. Joon-Seok, you were supposed to be simple. A transaction. 365 days of compliance in exchange for your father's life. I wasn't supposed to. He turned away, jaw clenched. I wasn't supposed to care. Chiamaka's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, more dangerous than any of the physical proximity they'd shared. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm losing control of this situation, of myself, of... He looked at her, and his eyes were raw with something that looked like pain. Of you. You never had me. You have a contract. You have my time. But you don't have me. Then why is your pulse racing? Why do you lean toward me when I'm near instead of away? Why do you watch me when you think I'm not looking? I don't. You do. He closed the distance between them. You hate me. I know that. But you also want me. And it's destroying you because it feels like betrayal to your father, to your principles, to yourself. Stop. Make me. It was a challenge, a dare, an invitation to disaster. Chiamaka kissed him. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe they both did. Maybe the space between them simply collapsed under the weight of months of tension. But suddenly, her hands were in his hair and his arms were around her waist, and they were kissing like drowning people desperate for air. It was nothing like Chiamaka imagined. It was rough and desperate and angry. Teeth and hunger and 3 months of denial exploding into something that felt more like combat than romance. She bit his lip. He gripped her hair. They broke apart, gasping. This doesn't change anything, Chiamaka whispered against his mouth. I know. I still hate you. Good. They kissed, again, and this time it was slower, deeper, more terrifying, because it felt less like anger and more like something real. When they finally broke apart, Joon-Seok stared into her eyes. We can't do this, he said. I know. It's unprofessional, inappropriate. It violates the terms. I know. Then why can't I stop touching you? Chiamaka had no answer. They stood like that on the balcony, wrapped in each other, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, either an ambulance or a warning. They didn't return to the gala. They went home in tense silence, sat on opposite ends of the car, didn't look at each other. But when they reached the estate, Joon-Seok walked her to her quarters and stopped at her door. "This was a mistake," he said. "Yes. It won't happen again." "No." But they both knew they were lying. Chapter 8. The kiss changed everything and nothing. Joon-Seok became more distant, conducting business trips that took him away for days. When he was home, he avoided Chiamaka, communicating through Ms. Yoonji, maintaining the professional distance the contract technically required. Chiamaka threw herself into school and visiting her father, who was growing stronger daily, talking about returning to Lagos soon, about starting over, about his daughter finally being free to live her own life. She couldn't tell him that freedom felt less appealing than it used to, that she'd started dreaming about Joon-Seok's hands, his mouth, the way he'd looked at her on that balcony like she was the only real thing in his manufactured world. 2 weeks after the kiss, Hyorin cornered her in the library. "You slept with him, didn't you?" "What?" "No." "But something happened. You're different, distracted." Chiamaka closed her textbook. "We kissed. Once. It was a mistake." "A mistake that you can't stop thinking about?" "Hyorin, I'm not judging. I'm warning you. Men like Yong Joon-Seok don't do casual. If he's interested in you beyond the contract, that's more dangerous than if he just wanted sex, because obsession is worse than desire. It's not obsession. It was just a moment of weakness for both of us. But that night, when Chiamaka returned to the estate, she found Joon-Seok waiting in her sitting room. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "You can't just come into my quarters," Chiamaka said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Technically, every room in this house is mine." "Technically, you're an ass." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've been avoiding you. I noticed. It hasn't helped." "With what?" He turned to face her fully. "With stopping myself from doing this." He crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed her again. This time, Chiamaka didn't hesitate, didn't think, didn't analyze. She just kissed him back with all the confusion and anger and unwanted desire that had been building inside her, like pressure in a closed system. They stumbled backward until Chiamaka's back hit the wall. Joon-Seok's hands framed her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks with a gentleness that contradicted the desperation of his mouth on hers. "Tell me to stop," he breathed between kisses. "Tell me this is wrong." "It is wrong." "Then tell me to leave." Chiamaka's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed at her to push him away. "I can't." "Why?" "Because I'm just as broken as you are." The honesty seemed to undo something in him. Joon-Seok pulled back, his breathing ragged, and rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to want someone without controlling them. How to care without consuming." "Then maybe we shouldn't." "Too late." His laugh was bitter. "I've tried staying away. I've tried logic. I've tried reminding myself that you're here because I coerced you, that any feeling you have is Stockholm Syndrome, that this is fundamentally wrong. None of it works." Chiamaka's hands moved from his shirt to his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "What do you want from me, Joon-Seok? The truth this time." "I want you to choose me. Not because of the contract or your father or fear. I want you to choose me freely, even though I'm the man who took your freedom away." He closed his eyes. "I want the impossible." "Why is it impossible?" "Because you'll never forgive me. And you shouldn't? What I did to you, trapping you, using your father's life as leverage, it's unforgivable. I know that. But I did it anyway, because I wanted you, and I'm too selfish to regret it, even though I should. Chiamaka should have been horrified. She should have pushed him away, run to her room, locked the door. Instead, she found herself stroking his cheek, feeling the tension in his jaw. You're right, she said quietly. It is unforgivable. You're manipulative and cruel, and you use power like a weapon. You've stolen almost 4 months of my life, and you hold my father's survival over my head like a sword. I know, but you're also alone and desperate, and so starved for something real that you'd rather have someone hate you honestly than love you falsely. She paused. I understand that. Because I've spent my whole life performing. The perfect daughter, the grateful scholarship student, the strong woman who never needs help. And with you, I don't have to perform. I can be angry and messy and complicated, and you just accept it. That's not acceptance. That's selfishness. I want all of you, even the parts that hate me. I know. Chiamaka kissed him softly, just a brush of lips. That's what makes this so dangerous. They stood like that, wrapped around each other, balanced on a knife's edge between wrong and something neither of them could name. Finally, Joon-Seok stepped back. I should go? Yes. Before this becomes something we can't undo. It already is. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and left, closing the door behind him with careful precision. Chiamaka slid down the wall and sat on the floor, her heart racing, her lips still tingling, her mind a chaos of conflicting emotions. She was falling for her captor, the man who held her father's life in his hands, the man who had bought her like merchandise. And the worst part was, she wasn't sure she wanted to stop falling. Chapter 9. The next 3 weeks were a study in controlled combustion. Joon-Seok didn't avoid her anymore, but he didn't touch her either. They existed in a state of perpetual, almost touching, almost kissing, almost acknowledging what was building between them like a storm waiting to break. He attended her medical school presentations, sitting in the back of lecture halls where he didn't belong, watching her explain cardiac pathology with the kind of focus he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. She started appearing in his office unannounced, bringing tea he didn't ask for, sitting in the chair across from his desk and reading while he worked, their silence more intimate than conversation. They fought constantly about politics, about ethics, about whether privilege was earned or inherited, about everything except what actually mattered. Chiamaka's father noticed the change in her. You're smiling more, Ajik observed during one of her visits. He was strong enough now to walk the recovery suite gardens, his new heart beating steady and true. Is it school or something else? It's nothing, Papa. Nothing doesn't make a daughter glow like that. He took her hand. Are you happy, Chiamaka? The question was impossible. Was she happy? She was trapped in a contract, living in someone else's house, her freedom contingent on a man's whim. But she was also intellectually stimulated, financially secure, and experiencing something that felt dangerously close to being cherished. I don't know, she admitted. I think I'm confused. About the man you work for? Chiamaka nodded, unable to lie to her father completely. Ejike was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised her. Your mother and I, we didn't start with love. It was an arranged marriage. Our families decided we were suitable. I thought I'd spend my life with a stranger. He smiled softly. But love grew anyway, in quiet moments, in shared struggles, in choosing each other day after day, even when it was hard. Papa, this is different? Is it? Because from what I see, you have a man powerful enough to have anyone who chose to save a dying Nigerian man's life to keep his daughter close. That's not cruelty, Chiamaka. That's desperation disguised as business. He's manipulative, controlling, and you're stubborn and proud. Perhaps you're well matched. Ejik squeezed her hand. I'm not saying trust him blindly. I'm saying don't let pride blind you to something real just because it started wrong. That night, Chiamaka found Joon-Seok on the estate's rooftop terrace, a space she hadn't even known existed, until Ms. Yoonji mentioned he went there when he couldn't sleep. Seoul spread below them like a blanket of light. Joon-Seok stood at the railing, still in his work clothes, tie loosened, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. You're not supposed to be up here, he said without turning. Add it to my list of contract violations. That list is getting long. Good. Chiamaka joined him at the railing. My father thinks you're in love with me. Joon-Seok's jaw clenched. Your father is a romantic. Is he wrong? What do you want me to say, Chiamaka? That I think about you constantly? That I rearranged my entire schedule so I could watch you present your research? That I fired 3 board members last week because they made dismissive comments about the African girl, and I wanted to destroy them for it. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were raw. Would any of that matter? Would it change the fact that you're here because I gave you no Yoon Jice? What if I'm starting to choose you anyway? The admission hung between them. Joon-Seok's expression shifted through surprise, hope, and fear. Don't, he said roughly. Don't choose me, because you've been here so long you've forgotten what freedom feels like. Don't choose me because of Stockholm Syndrome or gratitude or… Chiamaka grabbed his face and kissed him, hard and desperate and honest. When she pulled back, she was breathing hard. I'm choosing you because you're brilliant and broken and the only person who lets me be angry. I'm choosing you because you saved my father, even though you didn't have to. I'm choosing you because when you look at me, you see me, not a symbol, not a project, not an exotic mystery to solve, just me. She paused. And I'm choosing you, even though it's wrong, even though it started wrong, even though my father is only alive because you held his life hostage. I'm choosing you anyway. Joon-Seok's hands came up to cover hers, still pressed against his face. You'll regret this. Probably. I'll hurt you. Not intentionally, but I will. I don't know how to be gentle. Then I'll teach you. Chiamaka, shut up and kiss me. So he did. And this time, when they kissed, it wasn't angry or desperate or tinged with guilt. It was something softer, something that felt dangerously close to the thing neither of them was brave enough to name. They moved from the terrace to Joon-Seok's bedroom, a space Chiamaka had never seen, all dark wood and minimalist design and windows that framed Seoul like a painting. We should stop, Joon-Seok said, even as he was backing her toward the bed. Probably. The contract says no sexual obligation. This isn't obligation. Chiamaka pulled at his tie, loosening it completely. This is Yoonjis, my Yoonjis. I need you to be sure, because once we cross this line, I've been sure since that balcony. I've just been too proud to admit it. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Joon-Seok touched her like she was fragile and fierce in equal measure. Chiamaka let herself be vulnerable in a way she'd never allowed before. Afterward, they lay tangled in expensive sheets, Joon-Seok's fingers tracing patterns on Chiamaka's shoulder. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. How to be in a relationship that isn't transactional. We'll figure it out. What if I can't? What if I'm too damaged? Chiamaka propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Then we'll be damaged together. But you have to promise me something. What? When the 365 days are up, you let me choose again. No contracts, no leverage, no using my father. Just me, deciding if I want to stay. Fear flickered in his eyes, the first time she'd seen him truly afraid of anything. And if you choose to leave? Then you let me go, completely. You don't follow, don't manipulate, don't try to control. You just let me be free. The silence stretched long. Finally, Joon-Seok nodded. I promise. Chiamaka kissed him softly. Then we have 257 days to figure out if this is real or just beautiful disaster. What if it's both? Then at least it'll be an interesting disaster. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time since signing that contract, Chiamaka dreamed of something other than escape. Chapter 10. The next 2 months were the happiest and most confusing of Chiamaka's life. By day, she was Dr. Nwankwo in training, acing her exams, impressing her professors, planning her return to Nigeria after graduation. By night, she was Joon-Seok's what? Girlfriend seemed too simple, lover too transactional, partner implied equality they didn't have. They existed in undefined space, and somehow it worked. Joon-Seok was gentler than she'd thought possible. He remembered she hated roses, but loved orchids. He learned to cook Nigerian jollof rice by watching YouTube videos at 2 a.m. He anonymously funded a scholarship program for African medical students at Yonsei. But he was still Joon-Seok, ruthless in business, controlling in instinct, unable to resist orchestrating her life in small ways. He suggested which electives she should take. He arranged for her to present at a prestigious medical conference. He happened to fire a professor who had made racist comments in her hearing. They fought about it constantly. You can't just fire people who annoy me, Chiamaka shouted after the professor incident. Why not? I own the hospital that funds the medical school. It's well within my authority. That's not the point. You can't fix everything with power. Then what should I fix it with? Asking nicely? That professor called you that African girl, like you were an inconvenience. He deserved worse than termination. That's not for you to decide. I can fight my own battles. I know you can. I just don't think you should have to. Arguments like this ended one of two ways. Either Chiamaka storming to her quarters in fury, or them kissing until the anger transformed into something else entirely. Hyorin watched the transformation with worried eyes. You're in love with him, she said one day over coffee. That's ridiculous. You get this look when you talk about him, like he hung the moon, like you've forgotten he's the same man who bought you. He didn't buy me. The situation was complicated. Chiamaka, listen to yourself. You're defending him, making excuses. That's what happens when powerful men get into your head. It's not like that. He's changing. We're Changing into what? Do you think when those 365 days end, he'll just let you walk away? Men like that don't release things they want. The conversation haunted Chiamaka because Hyorin was right about one thing. She was in love with Joon-Seok. Completely, terrifyingly in love with the man who had coerced her into his life. And the worst part was, she wasn't sure she wanted the contract to end anymore. Her father's release date arrived like a deadline. Dr. Minsu declared him fully recovered, ready to return to Lagos, ready to rebuild his life. "You'll come with me, won't you?" Ejike asked as they packed his belongings. "We'll go home. You'll finish your degree at a Nigerian medical school. We'll start over together, the way we planned." Chiamaka's heart splintered. She looked at her father, this good man who had sacrificed everything for her, who had nearly died so she could have opportunities, and couldn't tell him the truth. That she didn't want to leave Korea, that she'd fallen in love with her captor. That home didn't feel like Lagos anymore. "Papa, I have 6 months left of school. Let me finish at Yonsei, then I'll come home. I promise." It was a lie. They both knew it was a lie, but Ejike was too kind to call her on it. "This man," he said quietly, "does he make you happy?" "Yes." "Does he treat you well?" "Better than I thought possible." "Then perhaps," Ejike smiled sadly, "perhaps home is wherever you choose it to be, even if it's not with your old father." "Papa, I'm grateful, Chiamaka, for my life, for this time. But don't stay somewhere out of obligation to me. I've lived my life. Now you must live yours." They hugged at the airport, and Chiamaka watched her father board a plane back to Lagos, back to a life that no longer included her daily presence, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. She was free. The contract had 165 days remaining, but her father was safe, healthy, gone. The leverage Joon-Seok had held over her had just disappeared. She could leave. Nothing was stopping her anymore. The realization terrified her, not because she was trapped, but because she realized she didn't want to go. That night, Chiamaka found Joon-Seok in his office. He looked up when she entered, and something in her expression made him freeze. "Your father left safely?" he asked carefully. "Yes. He's on his way to Lagos now." "Good. That's good." Chiamaka closed the door behind her. "Do you know what this means?" "What?" "You have no leverage anymore. My father is healthy, out of the country, beyond your reach. The only reason I signed that contract, to save his life, doesn't exist anymore." Joon-Seok's face went carefully blank. "Are you leaving?" "I could. Nothing's stopping me. I could pack my bag, walk out that door, and you'd have no power over me anymore." "I know." "So why aren't you panicking? Why aren't you threatening me or—" "Because I promised you 257 days ago that when the time came, I'd let you choose freely." Joon-Seok stood, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely vulnerable. "So, choose, Chiamaka. Leave, if you want. I won't stop you. I won't manipulate or coerce or—" Chiamaka crossed the room and kissed him, cutting off his spiral of fear. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "I choose to stay." "What?" "I choose you. Not because of a contract or my father or leverage. Just because I want to. Because I love you, Yong Joon-Seok. Even though you're difficult and controlling and you need serious therapy." Joon-Seok looked like she'd struck him. "You love me?" "Unfortunately, yes. I tried not to. Believe me, I tried. But somewhere between the coercion and the arguments, And you learning to make jollof rice, I fell in love with you anyway. He pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. Say it again. I love you? Again? I love you, you ridiculous, broken, beautiful man. Joon-Seok buried his face in her neck, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I don't deserve you. I'll never deserve you. But I love you so completely, it terrifies me. You're the only real thing in my entire manufactured life. They stood like that, holding each other in the office where this had all begun months ago. And Chiamaka understood that love wasn't always pure or simple or right. Sometimes it was messy. Sometimes it was born from coercion and grew into something real anyway. Sometimes it was choosing to stay when you finally had the freedom to go. What happens now? She whispered. Now we figure out how to be together without contracts or leverage or power games, just us. Think we can manage that? No idea, but I'd like to try. Chiamaka kissed him again, softer this time, full of promise. Then, let's try, together. And for the first time since signing that contract 200 days ago, Chiamaka felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope? Not for escape, but for something better. For a future she was choosing willingly. For love that had started wrong, but might, just might, end right. Epilogue. Day 365. The contract's final day arrived on a Tuesday. Chiamaka woke in Joon-Seok's bedroom. She'd stopped sleeping in her own quarters months ago and found him already awake, watching her with unreadable eyes. It's today, she said. I know. 1 year, exactly, since I signed away my freedom. Are you counting down the hours until you are released? Chiamaka propped herself up on one elbow. What if I told you I already tore up the contract, that I burned it 3 months ago because it stopped mattering? Joon-Seok's eyes widened. When? The night my father left. The night I chose to stay. I went to your safe, found the contract. You really should change your combination more often, and destroyed it. You? But then why did you stay? Because I wanted to. Because I love you. Because some cages become homes if you decide to stop fighting the walls. She kissed him softly. So technically, I've been free for 165 days. I just chose to spend them with you. Joon-Seok looked at her like she performed a miracle. You're terrifying. You know that? Says the man who bought a person. I prefer to think of it as aggressively recruiting. You would. They made love slowly, celebrating not the end of a contract but the continuation of something that had transformed from coercion into Yoon-jis, from transaction into truth. Later, over breakfast on the terrace, Joon-Seok handed Chiamaka a small box. What's this? Open it. Inside was a key and a deed to a medical clinic in Itaewon, in one of the neighborhoods with large African populations. It's yours, Joon-Seok said. Your clinic, the one you always dreamed of opening. Fully funded, fully staffed, waiting for Dr. Nwankwo to take charge. Chiamaka's hands trembled. You did this? You gave up a year of your life for your father. I'm giving you the future you deserve to have all along. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This is too much. It's not enough. It'll never be enough to make up for what I took from you. But it's a start. He took her hands. I love you, Chiamaka. Not as property, not as a contract, as my partner, my equal. The woman who taught me that real power isn't control. It's being strong enough to let go. I love you too, even though you're still bossy, and occasionally insufferable. Occasionally? Fine. Frequently insufferable. They laughed, and it felt like freedom. The kind you choose, not the kind you're given. The story that had started with coercion and desperation had transformed into something neither of them expected. Real love, built on honesty, strengthened by Yoon-Jis. Was it wrong? Yes. Would Chiamaka ever fully forget how it began? No. Would there be trauma to unpack? Therapy to attend? Difficult conversations ahead? Absolutely. But sometimes, the most broken beginnings led to the strongest foundations. Sometimes, monsters learned to be human. Sometimes, captives became queens. And sometimes, just sometimes, 365 days of coercion could transform into a lifetime of Yoon-Jis. I'm not going to lie to you. This story took everything I had to write, because I had to ask myself hard questions. Can love born from coercion ever be real? Does choosing your captor make you weak or strong? Is staying in a cage because you want to any different than staying because you have to? I don't have all the answers. But I gave you Chiamaka and Joon-Seok, two broken people who found something real in the most toxic circumstances. And I really hope, their story made you feel. If it did, I need you to help me keep telling stories like this. Subscribe not just for the content, but because you believe in community, in vulnerability, in stories that don't insult your intelligence with easy answers. Like this video, if your emotions are a mess right now, if you're mad and moved and confused all at once, that means the story worked. That means we connected. Comment your truth below. I don't want polite comments. I want real ones. Tell me if you're angry at Chiamaka. Tell me if you're rooting for Joon-Seok, even though you shouldn't. Tell me your impossible Yoon-Jai story. Tell me I'm not crazy for believing love can grow anywhere. Share this video with someone who needs permission to feel complicated things. Someone who's tired of simple stories with perfect people. Every subscription, every like, every comment tells me you want more stories like this. Stories about Afro-Korean love. Stories about immigrants and billionaires and impossible Yoon-Jises. Stories that reflect our messy, beautiful, complicated reality. You gave me 90 minutes. I gave you Chiamaka's heart. Now let's build something together. Community that believes in honest stories, in complex love, in choosing each other even when it's hard. Subscribe, like, comment, share, and thank you. From the bottom of my storytelling heart, thank you for being here. Until the next story breaks us, stay beautiful, stay complicated, stay you.